Well, with that, we'll transition to what we hope is a very exciting rest of the program. It is my distinct honor to introduce and move us into our panel discussion entitled Stronger Together, Meeting the Moment for Bridgeport Children and Families, and to introduce you to our powerhouse of panelists doing incredible work throughout the Bridgeport community. To save time on introductions, please refer to the panelist biographies and organizational summaries included with the pre-event materials we shared on Tuesday. First, to kick us off, let's welcome the amazing Dr. Monette Ferguson, Executive Director of Alliance for Community Empowerment, Carly Reyes, Director of School Counseling and Parent Partnerships at the Bridgeport Public Schools. And if you haven't met Carly, you must. And of course, our beloved Suzanne Clement, Early Childhood Coordinator at Cooperative Educational Services. Great. Now, while we're getting our three first speakers pinned, and hopefully everybody can see them in speaker view. Monette, let's start with you. Yay, hello.
Hello. I have to take you everywhere with me. That introduction was phenomenal. So,
well, you know how much I love you, all of you. Monette, we've known each other a long time, which I love.
Long time.
So with that, and you've been working in Bridgeport forever. So would you mind telling us and describing the state of the Bridgeport community right now, sort of reflecting on the past year and a half? What do you see as the strengths of the community and what are the challenges that you're seeing?
So thank you for having me. I see it as a blessing to be able to share real life, boots on the ground experience during this time. I struggled with this question, and we talked about this, Morales, and I talked about with this with the group. There's not one or two words or one or two phrases that can describe, first of all, how I feel about my community, the Bridgeport community, and then what we've all gone through over the last 18 or 19 months. So I did the best I could, and I hope some of these words resonate with all of you because they definitely resonate with me. So the first two words I came up with was striving to thrive. And I chose those two words because they resonated with me most, because when the pandemic hit, no one knew anything. And Alliance doors closed for 48 hours, and then they reopened, still not knowing much of anything about what we were to encounter for over the next year. But what we did know was that the community members that we must and had to serve were already striving to thrive. These were amazingly resilient folks that were innovative before COVID. So when you compound the trauma of death, illness, loss of employment, the grim reality of almost an entire community being locked out and lacking connectivity to internet resources, technology, and other resources, you've got the making of I don't think the word perfect storm would even match what was happening at that time. What we did know is that folks needed help and that folks were ready to receive help, and we just didn't know what it even looked like at that time. When I think about the strengths of my community and the community that I serve, unification and collaboration are two words that come top of mind for me. It seems like at the worst of times, they could be almost the best of times because we latch together, we hook arms, and we make sure that we maintain the elasticity and strength that our community needs for them to bounce back from whatever is going on. So what Alliance, and I probably latched on to about 50 close community partners to ensure that we were going to be that safety net, that trampoline that the entire community could bounce on and bounce back, even beyond COVID. And nobody knows or nobody knew what that even meant at the time. I'm hopeful. This community, if nothing else, is hopeful. there was not a time when I didn't speak to a community member, a staff member, a colleague, where we didn't find time to think about, okay, well, tomorrow, tomorrow, and just mentioning the word tomorrow at a dire time is a sign of hope. That means there's something better that could be coming. Thankfulness, touching folks, touching thousands of folks, day after day, year after year. Everybody's not happy, but everybody's thankful. I have to say that I rarely meet the person that is not thankful. And I'm never not thankful, because I always say, I could almost be doing anything in this world, but I choose to be here doing what I do because I love my community and I love assisting and providing resources for folks that it's just a moment in time before they just launch. And I want to be there for that moment. I want to be part of that moment. Also, one of the strengths of the community is how vocal they are. I love the fact that our community can come together, say what they need, say in a loud, clear voice, and then it's our responsibility to respond to that, right? There's no time where we should close our ears or our eyes and wonder what people need. They tell us what they need. They show us what we need, what they need. And if we have our eyes open and our ears open to that need and our sensitivity, our spidey sense on, we should never miss that mark. Also, I have to say, one of the strengths of the community, and this is both community members as well as providers, is the dedication that we all have to this work. Our community members are dedicated to safe, whether it's safe, affordable, equity, whatever that is, they are dedicated to seeking a better life. And we as providers are also dedicated to ensuring that we can help uplift community members anyway, anytime we can. Now we're talking about challenges. That was part of the question as well. Sometimes that's the easy part. We know there's not enough resources. We know there will never be enough resources. I have to thank Tauck Family Foundation and a lot of other philanthropists, or philanthropy as the big general idea, for really stepping up at a time during COVID, when a lot of times I understand there's all these applications and paperwork. And I could tell you from the Alliance Executive Director's Chair, I had philanthropy reaching out to me saying, Monette, how can we help? And that was at a time when I could not fill out a 10-page application. I could not sit with you and do the one-on-one. There was too much at stake and there was too much going on. So the fact that resources were needed was a no-brainer. So I appreciated the flexibility, and hopefully that set a stage for future flexibility, because we're always doing the work. We're just doing it at a higher rate right now. One of the other challenges I would have to definitely say is information sharing. We got to a time where we relied on the one-on-one, we relied on the social media, but we also realized there was a great divide there. So where we would rely on Facebook or social media to get to a certain population was not enough. It was no longer going to be enough. What about that senior that wasn't tech savvy? What about that homeless person who didn't have access? There was a time where people thought, oh, you could just go to the library and get all the information you need by sitting in a Wi-Fi accessible area. Well, with COVID, all that went away. And we had to rethink our best ways of getting to the most vulnerable population that we serve. So that's still a challenge in some areas. We know the price of postage has not gone down. As a matter of fact, it's gone up. We know that's a very ineffective, not a very speedy way of getting information. So I work with my staff often and some of our partners to think of better ways to connect, better ways to share information in a timely manner so folks can get served with the resources that they need. And unfortunately, COVID rose that to the top as a challenge. And then I would have to say one of the larger challenges for Alliance as a holistic server of the community is reaching our undocumented population. A lot of the services that we have are so rigid around citizenship and naturalization, and a need is a need. And at some point, we have to put all that stuff aside and look to our human nature and our human side of all of us and say, okay, this person is just hungry. And we need to, and thankfully enough, there are a lot of resources that do reach out in that manner, but not enough. Definitely not enough. I find myself seeking out those type of resources when, on the other hand, when there's a person who is not of a certain immigration status, is those services are readily available, almost to where there definitely has to be like this whole all out search pattern for just to get folks what they need, basic needs, which seems ridiculous in 2021. So those are some of the challenges that we've experienced at Alliance. I know some of my folks on the call, on the Zoom, have also experienced those, but I think the best thing that we learned from COVID is we must answer the call, regardless of how hard, how big, how difficult we may think it is. There's always somebody out there having a harder time than we are. And it makes us better people. It makes us better people when we respond in a way that makes sense for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Monette. That was incredible. Thank you for just your positivity and all of the great work that Alliance is doing, but the way in which you've shared with us these challenges, but also the assets and strengths of the community. I love the way you phrase striving to thrive, but you put it in just such an asset focused and framed way. So thank you so much. And we'll look forward to talking with you more about some of the collaborations that came up. And also thank you for uplifting, philanthropy, right? And how philanthropy did evolve. And that's a good thing. And we should all, let's start with us, continue to evolve, to simplify processes. So thank you for lifting all of that. I'd like to move on now to Carly Reyes. Carly, how have the challenges from the last year and a half specifically impacted K through 12 students, families, and the staff of the Bridgeport Public Schools? What are you seeing? What are your colleagues seeing? What are you hearing on the ground?
Thank you. Yes. And Dr. Ferguson, you're a tough act to follow. Kind of wish I was before you. A lot of the things that Dr. Ferguson was saying about the perfect storm and what she saw in the community kind of took the words out of my mouth on what we saw in schools. The disconnect that students and families so abruptly experienced really just, and I don't want to say broke the relationship, but really damaged the relationship between schools and staff and students and families. It became a crisis so quickly that became the focus and priority, as it should have been. And school and the investment in education kind of took back seat. And so, we saw that students and families just really became disconnected. And they struggled with the loss of stability that school provided, the structure that school provided, the support, the nutrition, the love that their teachers felt for them. Without that, their lives just became, it lacked a lot of that routine and consistency, and became somewhat, in not all cases, but many cases, a bit chaotic. And so I think that that's what really the students need and thrived from, was that structure and support that they received in the school. And so, we of course are seeing it taking some more time for students to get back in the rhythm of school. A lot of students took jobs, when school wasn't a priority at that time, and maybe their family needed more income. A lot of students took a lot of jobs, and it came to a point where, do I need to maintain this job, or am I going to go to school today? And so just building those relationships back with the students and families, welcoming them back, creating atmospheres in our schools where students want to be back with us, where they feel welcomed and nurtured and loved and supported, and that they need to be there with us, is really what the Bridgeport Public Schools are working on right now. And understanding that every student had a different experience during this time. Not probably not 2 students had the same experience. So we have to be really mindful of what their unique experiences were and how we can support them in our schools. But we also learned that students are resilient, and that they, and like you said, Morales, just to start us off, that they have a love for learning when they are given the opportunity, the space, the resources, and the support that they need, and that they can thrive in our schools when we are giving them what they need to be successful. And so we are working extremely hard to do that, but it has been a challenge. It will continue to be a challenge. But I think the work that we're doing right now will show some great results. And with all of these strong partnerships, we realized quickly that we can't do this alone, that we need to work together for our students and families to get them what they need and to get them back on track. And so I'm just so appreciative to be here, to have this experience, and to share with all of you the things that we're doing in Bridgeport Public Schools.
Thank you so much, Carly. That was great. And you are a rock star, by the way, in the Bridgeport Public Schools. So thank you for being here with us and for sharing all that. What resonated with me in it, of everything that you said, was amazing, but no 2 students had the same experience. And that's really important for us to keep in mind. So with that, Suzanne, how have the challenges from the last year and a half impacted children, families, and staff in the early childhood sector, which sometimes doesn't get a lot of attention?
Thank you, Morales. Thank you, Tauck Family Foundation, for always providing a lot of attention to early childhood. Is much appreciated. And before I dive in, I do need to share appreciation to all of the early childhood providers that are here today with us for the, because they are having interactions with children and families and staff every single day and inspire me to do everything that I do each and every day. So for Tanya, Kristen, and Evelyn, Colette, anyone else I missed, thank you for everything that you do. So I want to share my thoughts about the impact of the past year in the context of what we talk about every single day, and a shout out to my colleague Craig, that emotions matter. So today I'm going to ask you to reflect on the people that I'm going to talk about and the types of feelings you imagine that could be like strong for people every single day. So first, I'm going to ask you to imagine that you are an early care and education director, okay? You're concerned about enrollment, you're concerned about staffing, you're concerned about trying to meet all of the state requirements in the middle of a pandemic, as programs across the country are closing at an alarming rate, okay? I've been trying to find statistics, and I'm starting to see that 25% of early childhood schools across the country are closing, okay? That is an alarming rate, right? So imagine the feelings that people who are here with us today, who are trying to run programs every day, are feeling, okay? Then think of yourself as a family, right? You're driving to work. You're so thankful to have a place you can drop off your child, right? But you've never physically stepped into that building because your child is starting a program during COVID, right? And you have to figure out how to trust a program to take care of your most precious being, because you've never stepped foot in there. You could be handing your child to a teacher who you've never spoken to in person, right? Imagine how that feels. Okay. Imagine being an early childhood teacher, teaching assistant, or a family home care provider. You are caring for children every single day. You probably earn somewhere between $12 to $25 an hour. You rarely take time off. Children are coming into your classroom not with the skills that you would expect them to have. I have so many preschool teachers who say to me day in and day out these days, I feel like I'm a toddler teacher, right? Because children haven't had the same experiences that they've had before. Think about the fact that teachers are seeing their colleagues choose to leave the profession. Colleagues who have been dedicated to the field of early childhood for like 20, 25 years are saying, I can't do this anymore, right? Imagine how that feels to teachers who are trying to stick it out. Think about how it feels to be a teacher and say, how am I going to build relationships with all these families through technology? And how am I going to develop all these technology skills that I've never thought that I would have to develop as an early childhood teacher, right? And suddenly I have to, like, it's like in my face, I have to do it today, right? Right now, right? Absolutely. And imagine being an early childhood teacher and trying to talk to a 3-year-old through a mask. Right? So I know for myself, I don't get to be in classrooms a lot these days, but if I do, I take every chance I could get. And the first automatic thing I say to a child is, tell me your name. 90% of the time, I can't hear what they're saying through the mask, right? So imagine being a child. You're 3. You've been on our planet for about 1,000 days. Half of those have been in a global pandemic. Emotions matter of all of these people who I've just talked about, right? And I know that that's important to all of us. I share this with you to think about the reality of what's going on in all of our early childhood programs today. But that's not the only reality. The reality is also that I see joy and support and appreciation and collaboration and persistence, so much persistence, right? It's also a time of tremendous opportunity in the field of early childhood education. The pandemic really has made it clear that early childhood and childcare is a foundational part of our economy. People can't go to work if early care and education programs don't exist, right? And we are potentially right now in a place where our country is about to invest more money in early care and education than ever before. So at the same time that people are facing all these challenges, they're also seeing that there is tremendous opportunity here. We have a system right now that does not support all children and families and staff. But I believe someday we will. And I believe today is a start to that. So I come to you today, and I think this has been said, with feeling very hopeful. Thank you so much.
Suzanne, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And your hopefulness is contagious. Thank you for uplifting how much emotions matter, which we all know, but for really walking us through a day in the life of all of the folks, children, staff, parents that are, that was amazing. All 3 of you, thank you for all of these great insights and for sharing the challenges currently facing the Bridgeport community, but also the strengths and assets and optimism and opportunities that are ahead of us. And so we really are so grateful. I'd like to invite into the conversation now, Mark Donald, Executive Director of RIASAP, Colette Fearon, Lower School Principal at New Beginnings Family Academy, Dr. Allison Jordan Hurt, Principal at St. Augustine Academy, one of the campuses of the Catholic Academy of Bridgeport, and Ashley Nechayev, Academic Director at Horizons at Sacred Heart University, who will share specific examples of work underway in the Bridgeport community to address some of the challenges that we heard from earlier. So I think we have everybody. Oh, we had everybody. We'll see. There we go. So Mark, Colette, Ali, and Ashley, would you mind sharing with us examples of how your organizations are supporting the well-being of youth and families? How has your organization adapted or pivoted to meet the needs of those served, given everything we've just heard? Mark, maybe we can start with you, and Carly might join you. If you'd like to go first, please.
Sure. So before I get started, for full disclosure, despite our backgrounds, Morales and I are not in the same room here. So I just want to be clear on that and transparent.
We're not hanging out, Mark.
That's afterwards.
Sounds good.
So anyway, yeah, so I think all three of the folks who spoke, Suzanne, Manette, and Carly, did a great job of summarizing some of the challenges that we faced. And I think from the beginning, we kind of over here at RIASAP, and there's several of us on the call, kind of said that we don't have the opportunity to say no right now, because we have to figure it out for when they come back, because they will eventually. And so we've got a couple partnerships going on, particularly in Bridgeport Public Schools. We have been the lead agency through BCAC, the Bridgeport Child Advocacy Coalition, for several years now, in terms of being the social emotional learning and restorative practices partner with Bridgeport Public Schools. So we train faculty, staff, kids. We coordinate social emotional learning ambassadors along with the social emotional learning teams, partner very closely with Carly and Lynn, who's also on the call as well, to try and help people out. And, very grateful to have Mr. Testani's leadership and even Lieutenant Greck's leadership on the police side, because we've done now 3 trainings with school security guards. And, there's not a lot of districts who would believe in restorative practices training for their security guards. So that's kind of the core and the capacity building of it. And right now we're rolling out a few social emotional learning community schools where we have some folks on the ground. Right now we have a restorative practice facilitator and a student success advocate over at Marin. The student success advocate is a social worker, and her goal over there is to support all families and kids in their social and mental health needs, and not getting bogged down, unfortunately, as we know, in the school system. Our school social workers are really bogged down in IEPs, and there's just not enough mental health support. So we're piloting that, getting ready to roll out similar versions over at 2 to 3 other schools in Bridgeport, and very excited to kind of learn what's working, what's not, how can we improve. And grateful to have partners that are willing to take risks for our kids, because we know that if whatever we're doing, it's the old maxim, do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. And with our kids these days, everything's new, and their needs are new, and we're struggling with it as adults, professionals, teachers, new as well. And we got to figure it out for their sake, and for our own a little bit too. So, those are kind of the high level things that we're trying to do, and just think innovatively and partner with a lot of folks on this call, and then those who are not on this call, to do things differently for the kids.
Thanks, Mark. That's awesome. Carly, would you like to add anything about the partnership in Bridgeport and what Bridgeport Public Schools is up to?
Yes, please. I think Mark covered a lot of it, but I think, one reason why this relationship has really flourished is because, we're building our own capacity within the schools. We've increased our support staff tremendously, but in working with Mark and RIASAP, it's always like, where are the additional gaps? And, Mark is always the one to say, we'll make it happen. And so, using, we decided to implement a home visiting program this year. And so it's a family engagement team. And so this team referrals are made to this team to help these families that have been very disengaged. And it is an asset building, relationship building, strength-based, goal-oriented type of work that they're doing with these families. But when we realized that the teachers were just spread so thin and trying to do everything in the classroom and work with the families, we realized we just couldn't build the capacity. And we asked them, and it wasn't going to be possible. And so, RIASAP had a team called Public Allies, and that partnership just worked so perfectly. And so now we're able to use that partnership for these home visits. Another great thing that we implemented this year is called a student success team. Oftentimes they're called student assistance teams, but we wanted to make them student success teams. And so they're the team that can build these connections. So when the counselors in the schools feel like, they might have exhausted all of their resources, this student success team can then case manage these these students and make those outside referrals, make the home visiting referrals, refer them to the outside organizations that have the ability to service them, maybe wraparound services beyond what the school might be able to do during the school day. And the last great highlight I just want to share is we decided to have a district-wide student success day this school year. And so every student on one day would build a student success plan for themselves. And to date, we have 80% of our high school students have a documented student success plan for themselves. They've set 3 goals: an academic goal, a college career goal, and a personal goal, a social emotional goal. And so we're just thrilled that we have that many students that can go anywhere and speak on what their goals are and what their success plan looks like for themselves.
Thank you so much, Carly. And that's great. Colette, would you like to talk a little bit about what New Beginnings Family Academy has been up to? And you're muted, Colette.
There
you go.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. I just want to take us back to what Dr. Monet, Carly, and Suzanne shared earlier. I think all 3 women hit up on the different challenges that students are facing as a result of the pandemic, right? One of the things that was said earlier was that children lost so much. They lost the connectivity, many connectivities. They lost their connection to structures, predictable routines, to the love they receive in school, a safe space that schools provide for children. They also lost the connections to teachers and their peers. And many of our children experienced isolation while they were cooped up in their homes during the pandemic. And when we opened schools back, our school doors full time back in last May, our children returned to MBFA with traumatic experiences as a result of the pandemic. And here at MBFA, where we serve 98% of the student population qualify for free and reduced lunch, a lot of our students were entering our school doors each day pre the pandemic or pre-COVID with their traumatic experiences with them. Those traumatic experiences were only further exacerbated by the impacts of COVID. And for example, some of our students lost, parents, grandparents, their families lost jobs, so which had direct impact on students. And we know that in order for students to be able to learn, we have to take our students' social emotional needs so that they can they're available for learning, access their academic and social and emotional skills that they need to be successful in life. However, one of the things that we believe here at MBFA is that we can't do this work unless we take care of students' social emotional needs, and we have to address the traumatic experiences that they show up to school with every day. I provided that context to say that at MBFA we are not doing anything differently. We were already dealing with trauma. The only difference is we're seeing a higher level of trauma from our students. So we continue to implement the emotional responsive practices that we've been implementing for the last 6 years at MBFA to support our students in light of their COVID experiences. Some of these strategies that we're doing involves bibliotherapy. So for example, when you're in classrooms with children, different children may experience or exhibit certain behaviors in the classroom. They have difficulty managing their stress levels. They have difficulty regulating their emotions. And so we believe in using literature to help students unpack and process their emotions. We continue to do that here to help our students unpack the emotional distress that they experienced during the pandemic. Let me give you an example of what that looks like in real time. Last year in May, when we brought her students back to in-person learning, one of her second grade students was crying every day in the classroom. He was exhibiting really undesired behaviors that in a typical school where emotional responsive practice is not embraced would have probably earned this child an out of school suspension for 3 or 4 days. Well, at MBFA, we help children peel the layers back to understand what is the root cause of that behavior so that we can help that child. So after the teacher had exhausted all the tier 1 strategies, in the classroom, this student was referred to our social worker who's ERP trained, emotionally responsive, trained in emotional responsive practices. And during their one-on-one session, our social worker used various ERP strategies and techniques, such as reflective language or mirroring, to help the student to peel the layers back and get the student to talk about what is really bothering him, why we're seeing this surface level behavior. And within the first, a few minutes into the first session, that child communicated to the social worker that he was behaving this way because he was hurting. This baby shared that he had lost his dad the previous year. His dad was murdered in our city. And all he wants to do each day is stay home and wear his dad's t-shirt so he can smell his dad. That's the power of the work we're doing here. Our social worker, hearing this, used her ERP techniques to help that child. She understood that that behavior wasn't because the child was defiant. It wasn't because the child did not want to learn. However, it was because the child needed an adult partner to partner with him to help him carry this huge emotional burden that he couldn't carry alone. So immediately she turned, she grabs pieces of papers and she handed to him. And she says, "Here, would it help you if I give you the opportunity to write a story about your dad?" And while this child started to write the story, the social worker then went on the internet and researched and found photos of his dad, gave it to him. Long story short, rather than suspending this child, using her ERP, emotional responsive practice techniques, this teacher was able to help this child process that, help the child create his own literature that provides a sense of security and reassurance and safety. And that child was able to go back into the classroom. That's the power of what we do here at MBFA. And it's not new for us. It's just a continuation of what we do on a daily basis to help our children cope with the trauma that they enter our doors with so that they're available for learning. I don't want to take too much time. I could go on and share some of the other techniques we're using here. Morales, do I have more time?
Unfortunately, no, Colette, but that was an incredible story, which just highlights the day-to-day of New Beginnings Family Academy. And we are so grateful for all that NBFA does to really provide a whole child approach to education, social emotional learning, and just emotionally responsive practices for students. So thank you so much, Colette. If we could move on to Ali at Catholic Academy of Bridgeport.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Colette, that was a very powerful story, and so much of what you said really resonated with me and Catholic Academy of Bridgeport. I came on board this summer before last, July 2020, and was very blessed that the SCL work was well underway, thanks to TFF. And so much of what we've been really working on with our students is identifying and labeling emotions. And that has been a very incredible tool to have in our tool belt, especially with the increased trauma brought on by the pandemic. Really getting students to feel comfortable expressing what they're feeling, which, and so many of our of the students and the families in our community, that is not something that is happening readily or even encouraged in some cases. And so at school, we make sure that we try and make it a safe place where having emotions is healthy, expressing those emotions is good. And that's the only way that we can really work through and get to what the underlying cause of behavior is, to your point, Colette. So really also working with our teachers, shifting towards more of a restorative practices approach, which is a very new journey for us. And I can speak to St. Augustine Academy. We just started that journey this year, and we all know it's a journey. And really what we're trying to build on the existing foundation that we have using the Yale Ruler program. We have really great relationships that we are fostering between our teachers and our students, and using communication as a real tool to get to the bottom of whatever is going on. Of course, as many of my fellow panelists already spoke to here, we have students that are readjusting to being back in school. They haven't been in school for a while, our new students especially, who haven't been with us, or they're learning how to be in school like this. And, and that was described to you by Suzanne. School now looks very, very different. And so there's a lot of trauma. And as a result, our students are they're reacting instead of responding. And so much of what we're doing is teaching them how to recognize that they're reacting instead of responding, identify the feeling, and let's get to why that's happening, what's the underlying cause. Ultimately, the goal with starting the restorative practices journey is to move away from punitive approaches to discipline. We do not want to contribute to the school to prison pipeline. And so that is the goal of the journey that we're on. When I came on board the summer before last, one of the first things that I noticed, especially moving from Los Angeles with my previous staff, was, we serve 100% students of color. Our faculty and staff are almost 100% white. And our students were coming into the classroom and needing a safe space to discuss some of the injustices occurring around us. They wanted to come into the classroom. They wanted to talk about the murder of Breonna Taylor. They wanted to talk about the murder of George Floyd. And my teachers felt completely unprepared to do that. And so at that point, as a new principal on the site, it was like whatever I had planned for faculty meetings this year, I got to throw them out the window, and we got to totally reapproach how I'm going to do this. It took the front seat. And so, we recognize at Catholic Academy of Bridgeport that we really have to start by educating ourselves and our staff in order to ensure that we're really ministering and serving our students competently. And this is a process, and it's a process that we have made a priority. At St. Augustine this past summer, we audited all of our classroom libraries and our texts to make sure that we were giving students more diverse perspectives, that we were examining the way that we are teaching certain topics and the way that we are teaching history. And again, long process, but we started. And the Catholic Academy of Bridgeport has also partnered with Thought Partner Solutions, thanks to TFF. They have facilitated that connection. And so it's a year-long partnership where we're really diving deep into our environment. We're really analyzing our school culture and getting into the nitty-gritty to make sure that we're walking the walk, talking the talk. If we say we're inclusive, well, are we actually inclusive? Let's look at our day-to-day practices. As Catholics, we firmly believe that all people were made in God's image. And oftentimes I think we use that as a shield to not dive more deeply. And we do truly believe that all people were made in God's image, but society doesn't believe that or reflect that. So we really have to do the work to make sure that our school is the place that our students and families deserve now and moving forward. And that is a process that we are starting, and we're excited about. And I'm just very thankful for the support of the foundation and for all of these amazing people here.
Thank you so much, Allie. That was incredible. And you know how much we love our partnership with Catholic Academy of Bridgeport and all of our partners. But thank you for just the powerful way in which you just articulated the journey that Catholic Academy of Bridgeport is on. Ashley, would you like to close out this section of the panel?
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. I mean, what is there to say now, right? Everyone talked so eloquently about what's going on in the schools. I would say, Horizons is in a different position. We're an out of school time program. So I would say there's some of the same things that we've all said, but the pandemic, aside from, if we think about it from an education standpoint, it threw teaching practices right out the window. Like how do you teach and reach kids in a virtual space, especially our littlest kids, but all kids? Really kind of taking into account developmental ages and stages, making it meaningful. And we see and also there's an aspect of education now as we kind of heal together and work together. How do you provide consistency and say the same when it's not business? It's anything but business as usual. So we see our role as kind of extending that healing into summer programming for students, providing really a lot of stability. So we've pivoted tremendously. I think I'm proud to say that just like many organizations across the country and in Bridgeport, we approach challenge as an opportunity now, right? I think we're all so used to overcoming challenge that it's like you said, Morales, like, let's try. What if we thought about? And so we've done a lot of that. We've flipped our school year programming on its head. We provide monthly check-ins with our students and our families now to see what they need, make sure everyone's needs are being met. We provide, there's a lot of concern from families about academic well-being of their children, about grade level readiness. So how is my kid going to test? What do I do? How do I afford tutoring? I think that they might be struggling. So we're ready and able to provide academic support at no cost to families as students need it. And we're able to partner with schools in a really meaningful way to say, hey, have you noticed that this kid was experiencing some level of struggle? How can we partner to help and remediate this? We also have, like all of us have talked about, double down on social emotional learning. I think even kind of having basic conversations with our littlest friends who came in saying, something scary is going on in our community and you can't see it, but it's there. We know it's there because my parents say so, because everyone's acting different. Like, what's going on in our world? So being able to talk to our littlest friends, especially about, transitioning back to school, how do you read social cues when so many kids focus on faces, right? So we played games a lot over this summer about, if I cover my mouth, can you tell that I'm smiling? How do you know? Do you see it in my eyes? Can you hear it in my voice, right? And those games really trickled all the way up because we've really had to reevaluate the way we read each other over the course of the pandemic. For children, especially children who might struggle reading social cues, this has been very problematic. A lot of the work that we do, we have a trauma initiative that really has, we've worked hard over the last 2 years to establish and visualize what a trauma responsive community would look like. What would it take? What can we provide our students? What we know is that a lot of our students, when they arrived at Horizons, were displaying behaviors that were indicative of a lot of stress. We've all experienced it. Kids are sponges. They suck it up from their families, from the community. So what does that look like? We've all kind of mentioned it in different ways, but it looks like kids who display behaviors that aren't appropriate necessarily for an academic setting. And, to Colette's point, how do we make sure that when kids are in school, that the behaviors aren't just considered thorny and it doesn't get them in a place where they're being kind of reprimanded for showing their feelings, right? And so we've done a lot of work with our trauma initiative to realize some community values that ground all of our work together. So our values are now always, and they shape everything that we do for staff, students, and one another. I'm safe at Horizons because I'm heard. I'm safe because I'm responded to. I'm safe because I know I'm not alone in my hopes, dreams, and fears. And I know I can make mistakes and see them through. And that's been really, really important. Then it shaped all of the work that we do, including our teachers saying, hey, we need a lot of PD. We feel lost, like help. We want to talk to one another. We need to share with one another. So we provided a space once a week for them over the summer to come together and talk. How is it going? What's different? What feels good? What feels really odd? How can we help each other? We provided opportunities for teachers to get a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion training, right? To Allison's point, kids were coming in ready to talk, and our teachers and Horizons teachers felt not ready to deal with it. So we have to make sure that we have safe spaces for adults first to have those conversations so that they are prepared to have them with kids. I think so often adults say, we're inclusive, but do we really know what that means? And how do we really work together to identify what inclusivity is? And once we can do it with one another, then I think we can say, earnestly to our students, those that are looking at us, this is inclusive, and it's inclusive because, and it's okay to say to one another that didn't feel good. And thankfully, Pam Lewis came in from Connect Us, another one of our community partners, and did a whole PD for our teachers on a take 2. What does it look like when you say something that totally offends somebody else? How do you repair that? Right? So if you're going to have really earnest and honest conversations and you have a chance of offending somebody, you need to have some tools, right, to heal, because we need to get talking. So this evening is so nice to hear the experiences of one another, because I think one common experience we've all had during this global pandemic trauma is separation from one another. We're all working so hard and so fast that sometimes it feels like silos. And so these conversations help break the silos, build some bridges, and say, let's do the work. We're in it together. Let's partner and make it happen for Bridgeport, for our future leaders. So I'm thrilled to be here. I feel like I'm in the presence of greatness, and I'm honored to be sitting here. So thank you to the team, and I'm going to pass it back to you, Morales.
Thank you so much, Ashley. First of all, we are in the presence of greatness, including you, who is amazing. And we are just in awe of everything you're doing at Horizons at SHU and all the Horizon sites in Bridgeport. And what you ended with is a perfect segue to our next question. And I'm just going to ask a couple of you to answer, because we are, of course, running over time. But we wanted to shift the conversation to being stronger together. And how are your organizations leveraging community partnerships? Ashley just gave a whole bunch of examples, which were amazing. And we want to make sure that others of you have the same opportunity. Have new partnerships arisen during the pandemic response? We thought maybe we'd have Suzanne talk about about the early childhood space and what that's looked like, and maybe Mark and Monette can talk a little bit about what that's looked like sort of community-wide.
Sure, absolutely. There's so much to talk about when it comes to partnerships in early childhood. You know, the challenge of early childhood is we aren't necessarily a coordinated system, and that's really what we want to get to. So the beauty of having all stakeholders around the table, including community early care and education programs, family childcare programs, preschool classrooms in all types of schools, trying to come together to really think about what can we create as an early childhood community in the future, right? It really needs to be an opportunity to create something brand new, right? So I feel as if through our conversations, we are actually getting closer to the idea of sort of having, you know, the opportunity for support across the entire community. An important piece, I also think, because I provide professional development to programs across the community, I'm able to also see where I can create a brand new opportunity because we have all these great partnerships. So for example, I had a staff member recently do a training for the Alliance staff through funds through a whole separate project. So trying to find the connections over and over again throughout the community to have a stronger community. Early childhood matters. That's what it comes down to.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Mark, Monette, would you like to talk about the great work you're doing together and all the other wonderful things that
Sure.
Monette wants to talk about?
Absolutely. Mark always lets me go first. He claims to be a Southern gentleman, so let's put that to the test tonight. So what we realized when I say we, nonprofit providers in Bridgeport and Greater Bridgeport during the pandemic is we are stronger together. We don't have, or there was not really an existing unified network that was braided together in such a way to create, as I always use that trampoline metaphor for our families. So what a better time than crisis to realize how it is important and smart to align and get together in a faster way to immediately respond to issues, the same issues that all of our families were experiencing in a different way. So I was presented with an opportunity to co-chair BANC, which is Bridgeport Area Nonprofit Collaboration, with Mr. Mark Donald, who has become an amazing support and friend in this whole process because we are like-minded. And what we come to realize is we're not just like-minded, we have 35 organizations that we help braid together to create that trampoline I was talking about, which we're all like-minded. I have to say that some of those folks are even on this Zoom call tonight. So I want to give a shout out to all our BANC members that are here tonight, and just realizing that the 35 organizations are all very diverse. None of us do all of the same thing, but each one of us piece together like a puzzle to create just an amazing array of resources for the families we touch. We had an amazing event, and it was amazing in many ways. We had a resource fair October 2nd. On McLeavy Green in Bridgeport. There were 35 organizations who signed up and 30 organizations that showed up. We touched about 150 folks that day with information from all our organizations. And the benefit that was born out of this event was that we really only saw each other on the Brady Bunch screen for the last 15 months prior. We only had met via Zoom during the entire pandemic. So organizations began to visit other organizations' tables and figure out how they could align on different opportunities to make their resources and their responses stronger for community members. So thankfully enough, we were smart enough to act quickly during a pandemic, but it only created something smarter just to build a better mousetrap as we move forward in order to make sure that these resources stay a foundational just the foundational basic maintenance for not just families in Bridgeport, but also greater Bridgeport, but specifically for families in Bridgeport that we know that we all touch in a different way. Mark, turn it over to you.
Yeah, I hide behind the Southern gentleman because I know that I won't be able to say it as well as Manette. So, and that, you know, it really is just kind of it's a community, it's low pressure. We understand, you know, nonprofit leaders have a lot of obligations and there's a lot of fighting for their time. But we're grateful that there's, you know, we've averaged about 25 at each monthly meeting. You know, there's a couple of people on this call who haven't attended. I won't snitch Joe or Angela out because that would be wrong of me. And I definitely won't call out Ronell, who's dodging me to present. So that would be bad colleagueship. But also, you know, there's other people that are on this call that we'd love to have at the table. It really is kind of find out who's doing what, where, and how can we do a lot better job of resource sharing instead of accidental competition. You know, we find that, you know, in my other stops, the nonprofit community has been good, but not like Bridgeport's. And, you know, a lot of the leaders here will create a program because there's a massive need and we have our heads down and doing the work instead of lifting our heads up and saying, you know what, Dr. Ferguson does early childhood right at Alliance, so let me form the partnership, but also, you know, steer a funder who might be that passionate towards that work. You know, and the competition is really against the poverty and trauma that our young people and communities experienced.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was great. Huge thanks to our panel members for this engaging conversation, and there are many insights, contributions, and concrete and moving examples of the incredible work they are doing in social emotional learning, emotionally responsive practices, trauma-informed and responsive practices, diversity, equity, and inclusion, supporting the well-being of leaders, and family and community partnerships and engagement. Kim is going to move us into breakout groups. They're probably going to be super short, so we're very sorry, where we will continue this conversation and explore how we might strengthen our work together. So thank you all so much. You are amazing. We love you all. We are all friends here, and we just look forward to continuing our partnership with each and every one of you. So thank you.